Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. And on today's video we're going to tackle the cam belts, changing the cam belts or timing belts at long last. It's been a little while since the last video on the GL1000, sorry about that. But for a short while we did actually have a bit of a summer in the UK, and I've either been out riding bikes, going to bike meets, that sort of thing, or I've been working on a project in the garden as well. But anyway, we're back on the back on this at the moment, and yeah, so let's get into it. On the GL1000, the cams, so that's one of the camshafts going back there, and the other one is over there, sorry, going that way, and obviously the crankshaft is in the middle driving this driven pulley here. The camshafts are driven by these belts, so we've got one there and one there, which is quite unusual for bikes. Certainly was unusual at the time for Japanese bikes. I mean, normally you'd expect that to be a chain or sometimes gear driven, but on the GL1000, being a flat four for whatever reason, I suppose it's perhaps more car-like, and we've got belts. So the good thing with belts is they do tend to last a reasonable amount of time, but when they go, they just go, and that can end up with leading to catastrophic results, because this is what they call an interference engine, which means that all of the valves, which is the whole point of the camshaft, is to drive the valves and open the valves. The valves will effectively stop rotating. The pistons will still be going round, and basically you'll end up with the pistons banging into the valves. And worst case scenario is, or best case scenario is, you've got a few bent valves. Worst case is you've written your engine off. So obviously it's important they get changed on a regular basis. I don't know how old these ones are. They are genuine Honda ones. And the first thing to mention is that these belts sometimes don't look damaged at all. They can look brand new, but that doesn't mean they're not going to give way. The thing with timing belts is it's a synthetic rubber reinforced with fiberglass, and it's very easy to damage the fiberglass strands in these belts. And outwardly it won't show any signs of stress or wear, but inwardly it can be damaged quite badly. You've got to be really careful when you're fitting new ones, because you don't want to get any little nicks or tears in these, because it will escalate very quickly. So also you don't really want to get any kind of oil or contamination on these belts. They can swell up, and yeah, you don't want anything like that happening. There does seem to be quite a lot of talk about these people being worried or scared about changing these belts on the internet and forums, but it should be a relatively simple, straightforward process if you just follow the instructions. Basically what we've got to do is set the engine at top dead center, so number one cylinder is at top dead center, and we do that with the timing mark. I'll show you that in a minute. And then we make sure that the marks on these camshaft pulleys line up with the marks on the case. You can just see that one just there where I'm pointing, and you might be able to see that little mark as well, which is lining up with it. So I did check these last time, and we did discover that the timing is set correctly on this, and I know you can get, the problem is, the biggest problem with this is that as soon as we undo these tensioners and we slip this belt off here, this is going to move. You won't be able to stop it. It will move, because and the same with the other one, and the reason for that is because the lobes on the camshaft have the valve springs bearing down on them, and therefore that has no choice but to move one way or the other. It's going to move, definitely. So You can, I'm sure I've seen on one of the forums, I think somebody maybe 3D prints them. You can get like a block which sits in the teeth on the pulley, and I'm guessing it fits in that hole there, something like that, and it holds the pulley in exactly the correct position. In my case, what I think I'm going to do is, because I know I've got to reset all the valves, the tappet clearances and that anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the pressure off all the valves. So I'm going to wind the tappets right out, so there's no pressure on here at all. So that doesn't mean it's not going to turn. It may be that as I'm just messing around with the belt, it turns anyway. But let's see how we get on. Yeah. So first job is, let's get number one piston set to top dead center. So all we need to do to set this to top dead center is using the nut on the end of the crankshaft pulley, or the driven pulley. We can turn that, and what we're looking for is down in the timing hole here. You can just see, we should be able to see a T mark in there. Yep. And it's got a couple of lines next to it, and the idea is that those lines line up with that line on the outside of this. And I can tell, looking at that, that is slightly off. I need to come, I'm trying to get you right above it, and I can see, looking at that, that is slightly off. I think I need to just come this way a little bit. So I'm just going to check that, and then we'll look at the next bit. Hopefully you can see that's lined up better now. I'm directly over the hole, and the mark on there is, mark on the flywheel is lining up with that. Okay, so I'm happy. It's worth spending a bit of time making sure this is absolutely right, because if this is wrong, your timing is not going to be right. And, you know, worst case scenario, ruined engine. Best case scenario, if the thing runs rough. Next job then is to loosen off all of the tappets so that the springs are effectively loose and they're not forcing pressure down onto the cam lobes. I've got this little tool which I got from Honda Classics, and this enables me to, we're not going to use it all right now, but basically it sits over there like that, and it allows you to undo and do up the lock nut at the same time as this brass insert, which is effectively a screwdriver, sits in the top of the screw, so you can hold this while you're adjusting and then just nip that back up. Makes life so much easier. These are dead easy to get to anyway, so it's not an issue really, but on some engines like I think it was the 400 Dream I did, yeah, getting in to do those. Let me see if I can show you what I'm doing on this one. So I'll undo the lock nut. That's the lock nut loose. The screw is under tension on the spring. As I wind this out, you should see that spring move out, or the whole, yep, that whole assembly is moving out where my finger is, until we get to the stage where, let's do a little bit more. Yeah, so that is now completely loose, which means the valve is fully closed. But basically what that means is that on the other side of this arm round here, where it's on the cam, it means that there's no pressure on that whatsoever, and that's why I'm undoing these, so that the cam shaft doesn't move when I take the belts off. Okay, that's all the tappets fully slackened off. There does still feel like there's a little bit of pressure on one of the, or two of the rockers, so we might find these still move, but hopefully they won't move as much. Let's just talk about the adjuster pulleys for a minute. So the tension on these belts is basically provided by this pulley and this spring, and we'll talk more about what we do with that when we put it back together. But basically for now, what we want to do is undo the two screws that hold the pulley in place. So that's the pivot bolt, and that one you probably can't see it, but that plate that bolt goes through is the back plate for this, and there's a slot in that, so this can move up and down against the force of that spring. So let's get these undone. Yeah, so I can see, right, I can see that actually that's moved. You can see the red mark I've made, and then you can see the mark on the back plate there, and they have moved. And the reason for that is because we've taken all the tension off this. It will let me grab hold of this. Let me just zoom out a bit. And I can twist the whole thing. So that becomes taut again. What we'll do, to hold it, and then you can see that is lined up again now. Okay, so we know what we've got to do, and then what happens is the belts come off the pulley itself, the driven pulley. The front one comes off first, rear one obviously comes off last because it's on the back. So in my case, what I want to do is I'm actually going to take this tensioner right off to make it easy to get these belts off, just purely based on the fact that I want to check out these tensions to make sure they're okay as well. So I'm going to, how's that held on? Yeah, I'm just going to hit my spring hook. I'm going to take this spring off, then we'll undo both those bolts, and we'll just take this tensioner completely off. And same on this side. Okay, so it turns out every day's a school day. I thought releasing the pressure off all of the rockers and therefore taking the pressure off the cam lobes would mean this didn't turn. I was going to stay exactly where it was, or at least roughly where it was. That's not the case, because this there's a valve on each side that clearly is the rocker is sitting on the cam all the time, because this one, although in fact there you go, that's wound out so far, that tappet's wound out so far, let's just put that in a little bit, that's not moving at all, and this has moved clockwise by, or I would say that's jumped 1, 2, good 3 or 4 teeth. And if I try and twist this back so that the red line's marked up, I can go that way, no problem. As soon as I go that way, if you watch that valve, you can see what's happening. So basically, if I let go of that, it just springs back. So that needs to be right round there, roughly, to be lined up, which means there's a load of pressure on that. So when I let go, the pressure comes off it. So all is not lost, because according to the manual, the way that you sort this out is that when you put the belt back on, what you do is you turn this to apply tension on the top of the belt, and then you retension it with the pulley, or let the spring tension it at the top. So we're going to have to find a way of doing that. I don't know whether we can just do that by hand, or whether we're going to have to make up a tool to sit in one of these holes to hold this in place while we do it, which would be the obvious way of doing it. I think I did see somebody do it with like a universal clutch holder in between these, and just hold it under tension while they do the tensioner up. Anyway, I'll go and have another read of the book, and then we'll come back and we'll formulate a plan. Before we go any further, these pulleys themselves, we did have a conversation around the idea of replacing these, but I found out that these are around about £90 each. So, you know, best part, including postage, is £200 to change these out. So the Honda manual doesn't give any kind of lifespan on these. People I've spoken to say that, including an ex-Honda mechanic, basically said what all they used to do was to make sure that they span freely, there was no grunching or nasty noises, and there was no loose loose bearing or whatever. It didn't feel loose or wobbly. So I mean, these feel absolutely fine. They spin completely freely. There's no grunching or anything like that. So yeah, I think I'm just going to reuse these. I probably will just dress up the surface of them, because there's obviously a bit of light corrosion on there, so I'm just going to go over that with a little bit of emery cloth or whatever, just to wet and dry, just to take that off, just to give the belts an easier time. But yeah, apart from that, they're going to go back on. So the replacement belts I'm going to be using are from a manufacturer called Flenor Automotive Germany. These are have been recommended to me by somebody who fits a lot of these, and never had any issues. So that's what we're going to be using. Interestingly, although it says Automotive Germany on the packet, on the inside, on the belt itself, it says they're made in England, made in the UK. So yeah, don't know what that's about, but happy to fit anything that's made in the UK, generally speaking. So let's get on with it. Yeah, there we go. Hang on. Let's get the right way up. There we go. Flenor Automotive Germany, but somewhere, there you go, made in UK. Okay, after a lot of swearing and messing around, I think we're just about there. So it's been really difficult to film this, but basically this one is now on and tensioned. There's a fair bit of tension on that, and my two red marks, one there and one there, are straight across, and this one lines up with a little mark. I'll show you that in a second, a bit closer, when I've got the other one on. So basically how I've done that is exactly the same as how I'm doing this one. And what I've had to do is to, as I said earlier, the problem is this is still under tension, so you can't just sort of line it up where you want it and let it go, because when you do, it just springs back. So it's a question of trying to get the belt on with enough slack, so therefore on the right teeth, if you like, so that when you do turn this, the tension is put on the belt by that being in the right place. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it's just such a fiddly job, to be honest. But what I've done is I've put the tensioner on just really loose. I mean, it's pretty much hanging off, just to give me something to play with. And then it's just trial and error. Well, the way I've done it is trial and error. And I'm just using a sort of generic clutch basket holder type device. And what I've done is I've put the belt on and I've left some slack in it, so that when I put this on like that, let me just move you around a bit, and if I hold that there, if I turn this now, the slack comes off the top of the belt, and if I if I kept pushing down on this, it's going to start turning the crankshaft, which obviously I don't want to do. So that's got a nice amount of tension on there now, and I can see my red mark there, my red mark there, look like they're lined up straight across where they should be. So I think what I need to do now is, while that's under tension, is to put the spring on and then do this up. And according to the manual, you don't force this pulley up. You put the spring on and you let the spring tension it. The spring should be at the right. The strength of the spring is correct to put the right amount of tension on this, basically. So if I let go of this now, see that go back. So I'm not pushing that back. I'm just letting go, and it's just going back on its own. But so that is where it needs to be right now. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to find my spring and put my spring back on. There we go. And the long end of the spring, it's got a long end and a short end, and the long end was on the engine case itself. So I've got to try and get this through now without disturbing too much. Oop. It's going to be easier said than done now. I probably should have put this on before I started messing around with the belt. Sorry if you can't see a lot what's going on here, but it's just so fiddly. Am I in? Yep, okay. So, I think what I need to do now is just tidy this, put that under tension like that, and then do this up. And in theory, that should then hold the tension around the whole belt once that's done up now. Right, if I now take this off, I'm hoping, well, that whole thing should just stay where it is now. Yeah, okay. So by putting the tension on this and this side of the belt, it's now tensioned the whole thing and holding this exactly where it should be. So if I just get down and eyeball that, yeah, that's lined up with that, spot on. So I'll bring you over. You can have a look at what I'm talking about. Okay, so basically what we're looking at is the red mark I made on here lining up with that mark on the engine casing there. Okay, so that's the left hand side, and then if we come over to the other side, you can see the same is true of that side. You're not quite level with the case, but there we go. If I get you in the centre, yeah, there you go. So that's lined up on that side. Okay, so that's basically those now on. Would I do it that way again? Well, if I'm not doing it very often, possibly so. But I think I would perhaps buy one of these little blocks that you can sit in the teeth and presumably screws in there, which holds that, because obviously don't forget I also went around and did all the tappets thinking that was going to take the pressure off these, but it doesn't. There's still one valve, which is, well, two valves, one each side, which is sat on the cam rockers, holding these under tension. Anyway, they're on. So I'm just going to double check everything now by turning the engine over slowly by hand. Actually, I'm going to reset the tappets, thinking about it first. and I'm going to, once that's done, we'll turn the whole thing over by hand, and hopefully we won't have any coming together of parts. I'm just having a closer look at this one. I don't think this one's right. It looked right when I first put it on, but this one, there's hardly any movement in that whatsoever. And this one has got a fair bit of movement in it. That's not right. It should be like that. You can hardly move it at all. It's properly under tension, that one. That one, I don't like that. And it doesn't look like it's a whole tooth out. So I'm just wondering whether I do need to undo these and just see if I can retension that a bit. Yeah, I think I'm going to have a go at that. Okay, that's definitely better. So what I did was I took the tension off this, and then using those the clutch holder, I twisted this way, so put this under proper tension, then did that back up, so it held it there. Just resetting all the tappets. Valve clearance is back up. Nice little bit of drag. Right, that's all the valve clearance is done, so now we can rotate the engine and see if anything is colliding with anything else. Right, here we go. I'm watching the timing mark in the window. So when I've gone 360 degrees. There we go, we're back to T1. So we've been 360 degrees. So if we go another 360 degrees, we'll have gone right the way through a cycle of exhaust and compression. That T1, yep. Okay, so that's turning nice and smoothly. Certainly can't hear anything clattering around in there, banging together. So what I'm going to do, one last check. I'm just going to line the timing mark up once more. Double check my red lines, and as long as I'm happy with those, that basically is that job done. Yeah, so as a recap, it wasn't quite as straightforward as I was thinking, that's for sure. I just got it in my head that as soon as I'd undone these, taking all the pressure off the valves, that these would stay where they are, and then it'd be just a question of just slipping the new belt on, but clearly that wasn't the case. So those little things you can buy, parts you can buy that sit in the teeth and go in there to hold these. I don't know, there's somebody on the internet makes them. I've seen them on a Facebook page somewhere. I think I'd be investing in some of those next time, because that was fiddly to say the least. But they're done, they're changed. I'm happy with reusing the existing adjusters, because they're nice and free running. There's no noise from them. They've cleaned up well, so I'm happy with that. So yeah, that'll do it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe down below, and I will see you in the next video.